Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into something I think we all secretly obsess over a little bit. It's status anxiety. You know that feeling? You're like,
Yeah.
we're not quite where we should be. Yeah, that's the one. If you've ever felt that sting of not being enough, hit that like button and subscribe. We're using this book, Status Anxiety by Alain de Botton. It's so brilliant.
Oh, it is. It's amazing how he just unpacks this like universal feeling and, traces it all the way back through human history.
Right,
Yeah.
like who knew
For-
status anxiety was older than sliced bread? But before we time travel, I think we should get a working definition of what we're even talking about. Like, what is status anxiety?
Yeah. So status anxiety is basically that worry we feel about our place in society. But it's a little deeper than just wanting to be the coolest kid in school or whatever. It's about our value,
Yeah.
you know, our worth in everyone else's eyes. And especially in the West, a lot of that worth comes down to money, which really amps up the pressure.
Okay, so it's not just me then. Phew. I'm starting to think I was like uniquely messed up or something. But here's where it gets really mind-blowing.
Oh,
Botton goes back through history, and he shows how different societies have valued completely different things.
Oh, totally. Like, can you imagine in some cultures, like rocking an armadillo girdle was the ultimate status symbol? Apparently, they were like a big deal for jaguar hunters in the Amazon. Talk about a fashion statement.
Seriously. Makes you wonder what future archaeologists will make of our obsession with designer sneakers.
Okay, but the book doesn't just stop at like wacky historical trends. It gets really deep into the psychology of why status matters so much to us humans.
Yeah, and de Botton argues that it boils down to this core human need, love and belonging. We all crave acceptance. Sadly, our sense of self-worth is often tied to how others see us. He uses this really powerful visual. It's almost like an equation. Others' attitude plus self-image equals result. Whoa. Okay, I'm getting flashbacks to high school algebra.
Yeah.
So like if others think you're a loser, your self-image becomes I am a nobody.
Exactly. But it works both ways, too. Like, if people view you as successful, your self-image gets a boost and you feel worthy. Suddenly, that fancy car you just bought isn't just about transportation. It's about proving something to yourself and the world.
Oh, okay. So status anxiety is basically the love child of our need for connection and the pressure to measure up to other people's standards. And here's the kicker. De Botton argues that the modern world, with all of its progress, might actually be making this anxiety worse.
Isn't that ironic? We have more access to everything than ever before. Information, opportunities, and material wealth. Yet we're still incredibly insecure about our place in the world.
I know. And de Botton uses this anecdote about Nixon showing Khrushchev, the Soviet leader at the time, a model of an average American home. And Khrushchev was stunned by the level of material wealth in the home. He called it the Taj Mahal. But here's the thing. More stuff doesn't necessarily equal more happiness, right?
Right. It's like we have this paradox of progress and unhappiness. Alexis de Tocqueville made this point way back in the 1830s when he was traveling through America. He observed that Americans, despite their prosperity, seemed incredibly restless and sort of unhappy. They had everything, yet they still yearned for more.
Yeah, it's like we're on this relentless treadmill of achievement.
Yeah.
But the finish line just keeps moving further and further away. No wonder we're so stressed out. And de Botton connects this to an idea from William James, who's a famous psychologist.
Yeah.
He said that our satisfaction depends on the gap between where we are and where we think we could be. And the bigger that gap, the more anxious we feel.
Yeah. Think about it. You're scrolling through social media, you're bombarded by images of perfect lives and incredible achievements, right? So that gap between your reality and those idealized images can fuel a ton of anxiety.
That's so true. And that's where snobbery comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Snobbery. Like looking down on people who don't have the right handbag.
Exactly. The book argues that snobbery is like a symptom of status anxiety. It's about clinging to those external markers of success to try to feel better about ourselves and where we fit in the world.
Makes sense. And de Botton uses this example of this insanely elaborate Victorian cabinet. It's made by this company called Jackson and Graham, and it's dripping with gold bowls and intricate carvings. It was basically designed to scream, look how rich and important I am.
Oh, yeah. And that kind of extravagance can make the rest of us feel like we need to keep up, even if it means going into debt or sacrificing our values.
It's like a vicious cycle. We get anxious about our status, so we try to buy our way into feeling better, which just makes the anxiety worse in the long run.
Ugh.
It's exhausting.
It really is. And what makes this whole status game even more frustrating is that it feels rigged in the modern world, like the rules are constantly changing.
Oh, that's such a good point. It's not like those old hierarchical societies where your place was pretty much set from birth. You were a peasant, you stayed a peasant.
Hmm.
Today, it feels like everything is up in the air. But why is that? Like, why does it feel that way?
Well, de Botton identifies like 5 key factors that make status in the modern world so unstable,
Yeah.
and I bet they'll resonate with you. First up is dependence on fickle talent. Basically, our abilities and performance can fluctuate. Some days we're on fire, other days we can barely function.
Okay, yeah. That one hits close to home.
Yeah.
I definitely have days where I can barely string a sentence together, let alone write a podcast script.
Hmm.
And it's not like we can just summon talent on demand. I
Yeah.
think Botton uses the image of the muse from Greek mythology to illustrate this, right?
Yes, it's that feeling that inspiration and talent are these external forces
Mm.
that can bless us or abandon us on a whim.
I get that. So even if you're like super talented, there's this underlying insecurity because it could all just disappear overnight. And that leads us to the second factor, dependence on an employer. In the modern world, most of us rely on someone else for our livelihood, right? Which means our boss, our company, they hold a lot of power over our status.
Totally. And it's not just your immediate boss either, it's the entire economy. That's factor number 3, dependence on the economy. Even if you have a seemingly secure job, the economy can tank, and suddenly your status feels a lot less secure.
It's true. It's like this constant low-level anxiety.
Yeah.
The rug could be pulled out from under you at any moment.
And then there's technology, right? Factor number 4 is dependence on technology. The skills we have can become obsolete almost overnight. Think about all the jobs that have been replaced by robots and automation in recent years.
I know. It's like you're constantly running just to catch up. But technology is always one step ahead. Look, it's exhausting. And then there's factor number 5. This one adds a whole other layer of complexity to things. Dependence on the global economy.
Right, it's that feeling that your job could be outsourced to another country at any moment, which makes you feel even more replaceable. So yeah, we have these 5 factors, and they create this perfect storm of status anxiety in the modern world. It's no wonder we're all feeling a little on edge.
Okay, yeah, so we've established that status anxiety is real. It's deeply rooted in our psychology, and the modern world is kind of making it worse. So where do we go from here? Is there any hope for us anxiety-ridden souls?
Well, don't worry, the book doesn't just leave us hanging in a pit of despair. De Botton actually offers 5 potential solutions, or like antidotes to the status anxiety dilemma.
5 solutions. Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more. What's the first one?
The first antidote is philosophy. I know it sounds a bit intimidating, but stay with me here. De Botton argues that philosophy can help us develop what he calls an intellectual conscience.
An intellectual conscience.
Oh.
Okay, I need you to break that down for me. What does that even mean?
It basically means training your mind to analyze your anxieties rationally, instead of blindly accepting whatever society is telling you to value.
Right.
Think of it as like building immunity against the pressure to conform. So instead of feeling anxious about not having the latest gadget, you can step back and ask yourself, do I really need this? Does it actually align with my values? Or am I just caught up in the status game?
Oh, so it's about questioning those assumptions we've inherited about what it means to be successful.
Yeah.
And where is he?
Exactly. And de Botton uses the example of Socrates, who was famously unconcerned with material wealth or social standing. He was more interested in pursuing truth and wisdom, even if it meant being a bit of an outsider.
Yeah, Socrates was definitely not winning any popularity contests back then.
Yeah.
But his example shows us that it's possible to find fulfillment and even a sense of status outside the conventional markers of success. He basically created his own status system based on his own values.
Right. And that's what philosophy can help us do, to define success on our own terms. It's about finding that inner validation, instead of constantly seeking it from the outside world. But don't worry, you don't have to become a philosophy professor to benefit from this.
Yeah, reading Plato on the subway might not be the most practical approach.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that regular people can incorporate this philosophical mindset into their lives?
Well, it starts with just becoming aware of the thoughts and beliefs that are driving your anxieties. So like when you find yourself feeling envious or inadequate, ask yourself, where is this coming from? Is this belief really true, or is it just something I've absorbed from society?
I like that. It's about challenging those automatic negative thoughts and replacing them with more empowering beliefs. Okay, so philosophy is one antidote. What about the second one? This one seems kind of unexpected. Art. How can appreciating art help with status anxiety?
I know, right? It might seem counterintuitive, but de Botton makes a really compelling case for the power of art. especially tragedy, to help us cultivate empathy and understanding. Tragedy allows us to connect with the shared human experience of suffering and failure.
Oh, okay. So it's about realizing that everyone struggles, even those who seem to have it all together.
Exactly. Tragedy invites us to see the humanity in those who've fallen from grace, you know? It reminds us that even the most successful and admired individuals are ultimately vulnerable and flawed.
It's like that saying, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Yes, exactly. And art can help us access that sense of shared humanity. The book uses the classic example of Oedipus, the tragic hero who unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother.
Talk about a major family drama.
Right. But as horrifying as that story is, it's also strangely relatable. It reminds us that none of us are immune to making terrible mistakes, no matter how high we climb on the ladder of success.
So art can offer us this sense of perspective, and it can help us to reframe our own failures and anxieties as part of the larger human story. Instead of beating ourselves up for not being perfect, we can see our struggles as just part of what it means to be human. I love that. What about the third antidote?
Okay, so the third solution is politics. Now, before you roll your eyes and think we're going to get all partisan here, this isn't about aligning yourself with a particular political party or ideology. It's more about engaging with the values that shape our society and considering alternative systems.
So it's about understanding how the rules of the game are created and how we can potentially change them.
Exactly. De Botton reminds us that the ideals that determine status are not set in stone. They've changed throughout history, and they can change again. Politics is the arena where those battles over values are fought.
So instead of just passively accepting the status quo, we can actively participate in shaping the kinds of society we want to live in, a society that maybe values things other than just wealth and achievement. Okay, I like where this is going, but how do we actually do that? Like, I'm just one person. What difference can I make?
It starts with becoming aware of the systems and structures that perpetuate status anxiety. Ask yourself, who benefits from the current system? What values are being prioritized? Once you start asking these questions, you can begin to see opportunities for change.
Okay, so it's about educating ourselves,
Yeah.
engaging in thoughtful conversations, and supporting causes that align with our values. It doesn't have to be about grand political gestures. It can be about small, everyday actions that collectively create a shift. Makes sense. What about the fourth solution?
Okay, the fourth solution is Christianity. And again, this isn't about trying to convert anyone or impose a particular religious belief. It's more about understanding the perspective that Christianity offers, which transcends earthly status by emphasizing spiritual worth and belonging to a community.
Okay, so it's about finding a sense of worth and purpose outside of the material world.
Yes. De Botton points out how Christian art and architecture, like those soaring cathedrals of Europe, were used to elevate spiritual values and remind people of their inherent worth in the eyes of God. It's this idea that our value doesn't come from our achievements or possessions, but from something deeper and more enduring.
That's beautiful. It's like that sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. A community where everyone is valued and loved unconditionally. That can be incredibly powerful, especially in a world that's constantly telling us to strive for more, to be better, to climb higher. Okay, so we got philosophy, art, politics, and Christianity. What's the fifth and final antidote?
The fifth solution is what de Botton calls bohemia. Think of it as a countercultural movement that embraces a different set of values, one that prioritizes art, creativity, and non-material wealth.
Bohemia. So like embracing your inner artist or free spirit.
Exactly. It's about finding fulfillment in experiences, relationships, and self-expression, rather than chasing external markers of success. The book references examples like Henry David Thoreau and his experiment in simple living at Walden Pond.
Thoreau, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a classic bohemian. He rejected all the conventional markers of success and sought fulfillment in nature and self-reliance.
Exactly. And this bohemian perspective can be incredibly liberating because it gives us permission to opt out of the rat race and define success on our own terms. It's about finding joy in the simple things and creating a life that feels authentic and meaningful to you.
Okay, so we have these 5 potential antidotes: philosophy, art, politics, Christianity, and bohemia. But I imagine it's not about choosing just one.
Right, you got it.
So,
De Botton isn't suggesting that any one of these solutions is like a magic bullet. It's more about offering a toolbox of different approaches that we can draw from, depending on our individual needs and preferences.
it's like we're building our own personalized toolkit for managing status anxiety. So cool. But I'm curious, did de Botton have a favorite solution or one that he felt was most effective?
It's interesting. While he explores all five solutions in detail, de Botton doesn't necessarily advocate for one over the others. He seems to suggest that the most important thing is to find what works for you, what resonates with your values and your personality.
So it's like he's giving us the ingredients, but we get to create our own recipe for contentment. That's pretty empowering.
Exactly. The key takeaway is that we have more control over our sources of status and happiness than we might think. We don't have to be victims of our anxiety. We can choose to engage with the world in a way that feels authentic and fulfilling.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm starting to see status anxiety in a whole new light. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that really struck me in the book. De Botton talks about how in more traditional societies, there were all these stories and beliefs that help people cope with low status. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's like those narratives provided a framework for people to kind of understand why some people had more wealth and power than others. And they often softened the blow of being at the bottom of the hierarchy.
So it's like these stories, even if they weren't actually true, helped people make sense of their place in the world and even find dignity when they were facing hardship.
Exactly. For example, there was this idea that the poor were actually closer to God because they were more dependent on his grace, or that the rich were actually the useful ones because their spending provided jobs for everyone else.
Now, that's interesting. It's fascinating how these stories created this sense of social cohesion, even when there was inequality. But in the book, de Botton argues that a lot of those stories have been eroded in the modern world.
Right, the rise of meritocracy, the decline of traditional religion, the emphasis on individual achievement, all these factors have contributed to this shift in values.
Yeah. So now we're more likely to believe that success is a result of just talent and hard work, and that failure is a sign of personal inadequacy, which makes status anxiety even more acute.
Yeah, because if we fail, it's not just bad luck or an unfair system. It's because of us. It's a reflection of our own shortcomings.
Right. It's like we've lost those comforting narratives that once helped us make peace with inequality.
Mhm.
And now we're left to grapple with this intense pressure to succeed on our own.
Exactly. And that kind of raises a really crucial question for us. Can we create new stories for the modern world? Stories that acknowledge, how complex status is, but also offer us a path to contentment and peace.
That's such a powerful question. It's like we're being challenged to redefine what it means to be successful and worthy in a world that's constantly telling us what we should be doing and achieving.
Right. It's about reclaiming our own narratives and
Yeah.
defining success on our own terms, not based on some arbitrary standard out there.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I
Yeah.
feel like we've peeled back the layers of this seemingly simple emotion, status anxiety,
Yeah.
and discovered this whole complex web of history, psychology, and societal values.
It is amazing how much this one feeling can reveal about our individual struggles and the challenges we face as a society as a whole.
Okay, so as we wrap up here, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What practical steps can they take to manage this anxiety and find some sense of peace?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is awareness, recognizing that status anxiety is a normal human experience and that the modern world is designed to amplify it. Just knowing that can be incredibly liberating.
It's like taking the power away from those negative thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Like recognizing that they're not necessarily true. They're just products of the system we live in.
Yeah, exactly. And once you have that awareness, you can start to implement some of those antidotes we discussed, whether it's cultivating an intellectual conscience through philosophy, finding solace and peace in art, engaging in meaningful political action, seeking spiritual grounding, or embracing a bohemian lifestyle. There's so many paths to choose from.
It's about experimenting, right?
Yeah.
And finding what works for you. What helps you feel grounded and connected to your values?
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey. It's not a destination. There will be ups and downs, moments of intense anxiety and moments of profound peace. But the key is to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
That's beautifully said. So if you're feeling inspired to learn more about this, definitely check out de Botton's book, Status Anxiety. It's a brilliant exploration of this universal human experience.
And as you continue to think about all this, ask yourself, could it be that status anxiety, while often painful, is also a sign that we're out of alignment with our true values?
And that maybe it's a call to action, to re-examine our priorities, and seek fulfillment in something deeper and more meaningful than external validation.
It's a great question to think about.
Well, we hope this deep dive has given you some tools and perspectives to help you navigate this complex terrain. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into status anxiety. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.